Welcome to The Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. My guest is Sherrill Grace. Sherrill is a University Killam Professor Emerita at the University of British Columbia, specializing in Canadian literature and culture. For the last several episodes, I've been speaking with Sherrill about her most recent book, a biography of the Canadian writer Timothy Findley. It's called TIFF, A Life of Timothy Findley, and it follows his life from his birth in Toronto, Ontario in 1930 to his death in 2002. Findley came to prominence in the late 60s and had a successful and influential writing career well into the 90s. Important novels include The Wars, Famous Last Words, The Telling of Lies, and Headhunter. In her introduction to the biography, Sherrill describes Findley's life this way. His story is, in no small part, Canada's cultural story during the last 30 years of the 20th century, and his life's path intersected with many major artists of his time, from Alec Guinness, Peter Brook, and Thornton Wilder to Glenn Gould, William Hutt, and Margaret Lawrence. In this final episode of our series, we take a closer look at two of Findley's important works from the 1980s and what he, a man deeply concerned about issues such as war, human rights, the environment, and censorship, might think of current events if he were alive today. So, in the 1980s, Findley produced some of his major works. In 1981, he published Famous Last Words. For those who haven't yet read it, can you tell us a little bit about what that book is about and its importance?
Well, I think, and every reader has to have their own opinion and will, and that's why it's wonderful to be a reader. Famous Last Words is, in my view, his masterpiece. And there's probably been more critical writing about, scholarly writing about Famous Last Words than any of his other books, except The Wars. It's about the allure, the seduction of fascism. It's about World War II and its horrors. It's about betrayal of country, of individuals, of the self, and of one's own personal honor. It's about anti-Semitism. It's about trying to distinguish between truth and lies, between real news, what we would call real news today, facts, real news, and fake news. Mm-hmm. It is so relevant to what we're dealing with right now. Mm-hmm. It is set in a formerly posh hotel in the Austrian Alps, where a man finds refuge in late 1944 as the Allies are pushing the German army out of Italy. This man is called Moberly, and he has carried with him journals and has much valuable information about famous, distinguished, important people like the Duke of Edinburgh and Wallace, and many Nazi collaborators with whom he fraternized. Now, Moberly is wanted by both the Allies for being a traitor and the Nazis because of the information he has. He will be found and he will be assassinated, but not before he gets to tell his story. And there will be two American officers who will discover the story. And one of them will be prepared to believe the story, and the other will not. And that's where we play such an important role, because we're going to listen to the debate between these two men, and it's a very moving debate, and listen to what they have to say as they bear witness. And then we become, as readers, people who have to bear witness to the story Moberly tells and to these two men who will actually fight, argue verbally and passionately about truth and lies. And whether you forgive an artist who is a fascist and an anti-Semitist because they were also a good artist, a great artist.
Mm.
It's a very, very important book. It calls on the reader to pay attention, to listen carefully, to never forget the Second World War and what happened to the Jews and to others during the Second World War. And it leaves us with a dilemma. Can we forgive? Maybe. Should we forget? No.
No. Yeah. 86 brought The Telling of Lies. Again, I'm wondering, can you give us and our listeners a little thumbnail sketch of that plot? And its importance in Findley's oeuvre overall.
I love this book. I really do. It's absolutely delightful book, but it's a very serious book underneath being delightful. And it's pretty much brushed over when people talk about Findley. And they go for, not wanted on the voyage, headhunter, famous last words, and of course the wars. But I think it's a gold mine of interesting stuff. It's set on the beaches of Maine in an old hotel that Findley and the Findley family knew personally and loved and visited often for summer holidays. It's a murder mystery. It's told by an eyewitness. Her name is Vanessa. And of course, she's a photographer, but she also keeps journals. Hey, here we are again, right?
Right.
And it's a fabulous strategy because as she works to solve the mystery of who did it, she writes in the journals. So we're finding out what she finds out as she finds it out. And it's a great way to create a cliffhanger. It was brilliant. But in the process of finding out who killed the guy on the beach and why he was killed, we also find out a lot about backstory. And here's the theater thing again, right? We find out the backstories for the narrator's life and the murderer's life and the murdered man's life.
Mm-hmm.
The more serious story running through the fun of figuring out who done it is that there was a CIA plot, and this is not fake news. This is all too real, and we know it. There was a CIA plot to control people's minds by erasing their memories. Oh, wait a second, memory and the importance of memory.
Mm-hmm.
By erasing their memories in Cold War Canada and the United States. And this is based on fact, the CIA-funded research conducted by a Dr. Ewan Cameron at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal in the late 50s and into the 60s. This was called M-Culture. And it destroyed people. So it plays an important role in this book, which I'll leave the reader to discover because I really recommend you read the book.
Mm-hmm.
That is Findley's The Telling of Lies. It's a beautifully crafted story. It's enriched by historical research into big government, big business control of our lives during the Cold War. But it's creepily relevant to what we're living through and have been living through in the last, shall I say 4 years, or shall I simply say 4 months or 4 weeks?
Right.
I mean, really? And it explores Findley's major themes. You've got war, you've got power, you've got lies, you've got violence, you've got destruction, and you've got memory and the urgent need to preserve memory.
Mm-hmm. You visited where that hotel is or was, right, during your research and your field work.
Are we going to go to that field work?
We don't have to. I just wanted to. I wondered if seeing the physical place enhanced your, memory or interpretation of the book itself at all.
That's I trespassed, I'm afraid. It was quite an ordeal finding the Atlantic House.
Yeah.
Finally did. and down this private road. It was clearly marked a private road to the place where I knew the hotel had once existed, and that a fancy set of condos had been developed on the site. But, there was a sign, no trespassing, gated community, but there also was a path through the bushes and the sand down to the beach. Well, I'd come a long way, and I was on the Canadian taxpayer's dime. So I was damned if I was not going to go down that path.
Exactly.
And of course I went down the path. And did it tell me more about the novel? Well, I mean, there's the beach that Findley describes. I mean, his ability to describe scenes and to set scenes, physical scenes like this, is of course wonderful. Many writers have this gift. Findley had it in spades. So it told me that. But I came back up the path, and there was a local resident waiting for me who wanted to know who I was and what I was doing, and did I not realize that? Well, I told her who I was and why I was there, and I think it was 3/4 of an hour later, I finally got away because she had all these stories to tell me. And so it ended up being a perfectly cordial, largely irrelevant conversation. And I was not arrested and thrown into the local jail. So it didn't tell me much about the novel, but I had to do it.
Yes.
I had to do it. I've trespassed in other places too in my Findley research. But that one was the most fun. And it had a happy ending.
Yes, it did. So it's been almost 20 years since Timothy Findley passed away. I'm wondering what you see as his legacy.
Many things. It's always a legacy, a gift to have great writing.
Yep.
And so that's the first thing. That's the obvious thing. We have a body of work here, and I include his theater, his plays. We have a body of work here, short stories, novels, plays, and memoirs, nonfiction, which are extremely worthy of being read and valued. They're very meaningful. Apart from that, I would say there are some very central warnings and messages that Findley leaves us with through this wonderful body of work. The importance of the natural world and our duty within it through connection to protect it, to see ourselves as part of it is hugely relevant right now. He would have been a great fan of young Greta Thunberg. The dangers of not paying attention to violence, to war, to greed, to oppression, to just sitting back and doing nothing. We must pay attention. We must stand up. We must vote. We must oppose where we can. The horrors of bigotry of all kinds. And he's very, very clear on that. And I think through his writing, able to elicit from his readers an understanding and an empathy, at times even a reconciliation, which I think is an amazing step to make. I don't know that I can make that step, but certainly empathy and understanding of all of these issues. But always, the importance of our imaginations. If we fail at something, Findley would have said, we've failed our imaginations. We've failed to imagine that things could be different, that we've failed to pay attention, that we've just resigned our responsibility to pay attention, to take care, to seek out connections, to understand our role in the world, to foster understanding. And I think finally, his life is really quite delightful love story. There were problems. I mean, who doesn't have problems in a 40-year marriage?
Right.
There were problems. There were problems with his parents, particularly with his father, to whom he said he was finally reconciled. I find that breathtaking, but that was where he ended up. Good for him. It's a love story.
Mm-hmm.
in which he offers love in his characters. A wonderful character like Vanessa in The Telling of Lies, and hope. I wanted to call the biography Hope Against Despair.
Mm.
And I really think it is a story of hope against despair, a love story and a success story. And that's part of his legacy.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So TIFF is dedicated to Bill Whitehead, and it reads, "In memory of Bill Whitehead, 1931 to 2018, who made so much possible." And so I'm curious, what possibilities that do you hope this book opens up?
I hope people will read Findley for the first time or go back and reread him.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one, number two, number three of the things I hope.
Great.
Then I hope by reading him and the nonfiction as well, that people will hear what he has to say.
Mm-hmm.
That we will see him. That first play of his is called "Can You See Me Yet?" And I hope we can see him now and hear him. In our current context of digital and social media noise and danger, will we stop and think and remember the values of democracy and diversity? He stood for those values. He wrote and protested against the social media of his day. God knows what he would have thought of things today. And during this pandemic, he reminds us of our fragility, of our need for nature. Haven't we all gone out into where we can find parks and trees and nature during this our lockdowns and our limitations? I know I have. I hear it all the time on the radio that people have gone out. I hope people rediscover this importance. Findley tells us about it all the time.
Mm.
And he warned against things like this pandemic in a short story published in 2001 called "We Must Prepare for a New Plague." And the story ends with the kind of preparation that he celebrated: song, art, imagination, and memory.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, Sherrill, that's all we have time for, but thank you so much for joining us on the program. This was fantastic. You just heard from Sherrill Grace. Sherrill is a University Killam Professor Emerita at the University of British Columbia, specializing in Canadian literature and culture. Sherrill's most recent book is the biography on the Canadian writer Timothy Findley, called TIFF, A Life of Timothy Findley, published by Wilfrid Laurier University Press, the sponsor of this series. If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, and if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, drop me a line. I'm at bmickey@ala-choice.org. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer Mark Turks and digital media assistant Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.